Now let's see how this government budget deficit, that means government expenditure is more than government income, going to influence to the current account deficit. Now we already getting through how national accounts, national income and expenditure influence to the current account and financial account. So here let's see. So now national spending, we try to expand the equation like household spending plus private investment plus government spending. The national spending, we incorporating government spending. Okay, consumption plus investment plus government spending. Okay, so then household spending we can equalize to national income minus private saving plus taxes. Right? So national income වලින් private saving and taxes අඩු කරාම අපිට household saving එක එනවා. Okay, so that is a household saving part. So household saving we can include like national income minus private saving minus taxes. Okay, so then national spending equation we can again rewrite as national income minus private saving minus taxes plus private investment plus government spending. Okay, so the government budget deficit, we know that government spending minus taxes. Deficit එකක් නෑ හැමෝම government එක කියන්නේ because government expenditure more than the taxes mean their government income source. Right? So then we can rearrange the equation like national spending minus national income, right? National spending minus national income equal to private investment minus private saving plus government budget deficit. Right? Equation now we are reducing government national spending to national income because here we are dealing with government budget deficit. Right? So we are getting national spending minus national income equal private investment minus private saving plus government budget deficit. Okay. So then let's see. So we already identified that net capital inflow equal to national spending minus national product. That is net capital inflow mean the current account, financial account surplus. That is when we are having more imports than export. Import වලට වඩා export අඩු වෙච්ච ගමන් අපිට එනවා net capital inflow එක. That is current account surplus because we have to borrow funds from foreign countries in order to complete the current account deficit. Right? We already identify those things. When we have a current account deficit, we have a financial account surplus. Now this is the same equation I'm right. Right? Here financial account surplus or capital inflows equal to import minus export. Okay. So when we are having a current account balance, that is private saving surplus minus government budget deficit. Okay. Now our current account balance is now getting equal when our private saving surplus, that is our foreign investments, net foreign investment minus government budget deficit. So what we can learn from here, the nation's current account balance is identically equal to its private saving investment balance less government budget deficit. Okay. Oh, so what does it mean? The nation running a current account deficit is not saving enough to finance its private investment as well as the government budget deficit. Right? If a nation having more import expenditure than export income, that indicate that the nation does not have enough saving to finance its own domestic investment as well as to finance its own government budget deficit. That means if you're having current account deficit, the country is going to be more issue with covering government budget deficit. That is why the economics are always telling that the nation has to reduce the government budget deficit. Government budget deficit that means government expenditure has to be some sort of cover with government income. Okay. So this is show the relationship among private saving, private investment, government budget deficit and current account balance. Okay. So if you have a current account deficit that incorporate that both publicly and privately and investment more than nation currently producing. Right? If you have a deficit, mean we are consuming more as well as we are investing more. Right? We are investing more. That's why nations are keeping current account deficit as a purposefully. So if you want to correct the current account deficit, right, it only be effective if you can change the private saving. That means we have to encourage private saving as well as a private investment, and we try to control the government deficit. This is why there is always economics are telling that government has to control their government deficit in order to control with the current account deficit. Right? So that is a relationship with government budget deficit and current account balance. Right? So then let's look at, now we identify that most of the countries are going with the current account deficit, right? And now we identified what are the reasons that countries are going with the current account deficit and why some countries are purposefully keep current account deficit. Okay, so long-term current account surplus, so as well as current account deficit is not good sign for a economically healthy situation. දෙකම හොඳ නැහැ. ඕනට වඩා current account surplus එකක් හොඳ නැහැ. ඕනට වඩා current account deficit එකක් හොඳ නැහැ. So there have to be maintained the balance in between current account deficit and current account surplus. Right? So now we are going to check how countries are going to maintain or manage the current account deficit. So let's talk about some sort of strategies that the nations or economies are applied to manage current account deficit. The first most common application is we call currency depreciation. Current account එකේ deficit එකක් පාලනය කරන්න ගොඩාක් country use කරන්නේ currency appreciation, right? Even you understand that even in our economics always telling that if you want to maintain the competitive market, let domestic currency depreciate. Competitive market එකක් වෙන්න නම් currency එක depreciate වෙන්න දෙන්න කියනවා. Okay, that now remember all those strategies, almost all these strategies are not good for a long-term purposes. Okay, but it's good for a short-term purposes because we identify that if we have a current account deficit, there is an opportunity, there is a possibility of having surplusing financial account. So අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම current account එකේ deficit එකක් තියෙනවා කියලා කියන්නේ financial account එකේ surplus එකක්. So why financial account surplus is there? Because investment are high, or else in the other way around borrowings are high. දෙකම වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Right? And when we have a current account surplus, mean there is more chances to capital outflows. So that capital outflows are always not good for a country for a long-term period. Okay? That's why I mentioned you current account deficit and current account surplus is not good to have long-term trend. Right? ඕනට වඩා දීර්ඝකාලීනව තියෙන එක රටකට හොඳ නැහැ. So let's look at what sort of strategies that government use to maintain or manage the current account deficit. Under that, first one we call currency depreciation. So many academics, politicians, even the business people also believe that depreciation can reduce the trade deficit in a floating rate system. If we have a floating rate system, that is flexible rate system, when we are trying to depreciate the domestic currency, so what are the consequences we know? When we are depreciating domestic currency, that means imports getting high and export getting cheaper to the foreign buyers. Then imports demand getting lower and export demand getting increases. Right? When the import getting lower and export demand getting increases, then after considerable time period, again exchange rate going to be decreased. That means the domestic currency going to be appreciated. Right? So let it happen as the market forces control. But when we are having a current account deficits, government or monetary authorities, the main tool they are using is to currency depreciation, right? But remember, as when we are depreciating domestic currency, it required considerable time to affect the current account balance, right? The currency depreciate karapu gaman me de siddha wenni naha. What are the consequences? Imports getting decreased, export need to increase. But those two consequences are not occurring as far as currency getting depreciated. Currency depreciate vecha gaman domestic imports වලට තියෙන demand එක අඩු වෙන්නෙත් නැහැ, export වලට තියෙන demand එක වැඩි වෙන්නෙත් නැහැ. So that consequences can be explained using we call J-curve theory. ඔක අපි කතා කරනවා theory එකක් තුලින් ඒකට අපි කියන්නේ J-curve theory. So what is this J-curve theory? So this J-curve theory explain us what will happen to the import and export as soon as when currency getting depreciate. Currency එක depreciate වෙච්ච ගමන්ම රටේ import and export වලට වෙන්නේ මොකද්ද කියන එක තමයි J-curve effect එකෙන් J-curve theory එකෙන් කියන්නේ. So when the government or monetary authorities depreciate domestic currency, the results they expected are not occurring as far as their belief, right? ඒගොල්ලෝ බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන විදිහට වෙන්නේ නැහැ, right? So let's talk about that. So J-curve theory indicate that worsening of the trade balance following the depreciation of domestic currency can be occurred and it is temporary. So what is the meaning of worsening the trade balance? Now, as we all know, right, when domestic currency depreciate, when domestic currency depreciates, right, what are the main expectation? Right, when domestic currency depreciate, we definitely know import getting expenses, right? If we are paying 100 rupees for import earlier, after the depreciation, now we have to pay 150 rupees. Then imports getting expenses and export getting cheaper, right? Indirect quotation එකට දැම්මොත් ඔයගොල්ලන්ට පේනවා පිටරට ඒ කියන්නේ foreigner කෙනෙක් එහෙම නැත්නම් foreigner buyer කෙනෙක් අපේ භාණ්ඩයක් ගන්න දැන් වියදම් කරන්න ඕනේ foreign currency ගන්න අඩු වෙනවා. So then export getting cheaper. Okay, so what we are expecting from the currency depreciation is, as a result of import getting expenses, import demand has to be decrease. But is it happened as far as we expected? Import demand එක අඩු වෙනවද currency එක depreciate වෙච්ච ගමන්ම? No, right? Because it takes some time for people to adjust for a substitute for their early imported goods. කලින් import කරපු භාණ්ඩ වලට දැන් substitute හොයන්න ඕනේ. Okay, so earlier if we imported some particular food item, right, as a result of the depreciation, now prices increase. But even the price increase, people are willing to buy it because they are still searching for the substitute. කලින් ආනයනය කරපු භාණ්ඩ වලට ආදේශ හොයන්න කල් යනවා. ඒ කාලේ යනකම් people are demanding, right? People are demanding imported goods even at the increasing price, right? Well, because this one is not happening overnight. Make එක පාර වෙන්නේ නැහැ, right? But it's happening gradually. But up to some level, up to some time period, import expenditures getting increases, even the depreciation of domestic currency was there, right? So consumers decided to buy import substitute only after producers begin to supply what was previously imported. කලින් ගත්ත දේවල්ට දැන් domestically substitute පෙන්වන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට තමයි මිනිස්සු ගන්නෙ. If there is no domestically substitute product for the early imported product, people still willing to buy imported goods, even the prices are high, right? Therefore, in a short time period, as a result of the domestic currency depreciate, the import expenditure getting high. එතකොට කෙටි කාලයක් තුල මේ depreciation එක තිබ්බා කියලා වුණත් import වලට යන expenditures වැඩි වෙනවා. So that is the first consequence as a result of the depreciation of domestic currency, right? And look at the export. We are expecting that as a result of the foreign domestic currency depreciation, export getting more demand, because now export getting cheaper for the foreign buyers, they will ready to buy more, right? So foreigners buyer wish to purchase those products, but it takes time for us to, right? It takes time for us to provide the supply. Okay, it takes time for us to provide supply, right? As well as the foreigners need time to adjust their preference toward our exports. Now they know our export getting cheaper. Then අපේ export cheap වෙනවා කියලා. ඒකට ඒගොල්ලොත් තමන් කලින් පාවිච්චි කරපු බාණ්ඩේ මේ පැත්තට හැරෙන්න ඕනේ. The consumer preference has to be changed, but it takes time for people to change from one particular product to substitute product, like what happened in our import consumption. අපි import වලට උනා වගේම තමයි. බාණ්ඩ වැඩි වුණා කියලා අපිට substitute එකකට යන්න කාලයක් යනවා. ඒකට අපේ බාණ්ඩ වල මිල අඩු වුණා කියලා foreign buyerටත් ඒක මිලදී ගන්න යම් කිසි කාලයක් යනවා. As well as the domestic producer is ready to provide that excess demand of export. Then we are expecting that export demand increase, but we don't see that export demand increase in short term, right? Therefore, our export income is not getting increases as a result of the domestic currency depreciation overnight, right? So when the time is moving on, people are change for a substitute imports, then import demand decrease, and now we are ready to provide more export, then export demand, export income increases, then the trade balance eventually improves. Okay, but this is not happening overnight. So that is what we call J curve effect. So you can see through this J curve, because this curve is somewhat like letter J. මේක අර J එක ටිකක් පොඩ්ඩක් ඇද වෙලා වගේ තියෙන. හැබැයි ඒක J එකක් වගේ හින්දා we call letter, this is J curve effect. Now you can see, let's see the depreciation. Okay, now domestic currency getting depreciate. Okay, now this is the changes in balance of trade, that is trade surplus and trade deficit. Okay, as a result of the currency depreciate, right, we are having more import demand, because people take times to substitute from import to another substitute product, right? So then import expenditure getting increased, as a result of that trade balance getting depreciate. Trade එක යන්නේ deficit එකක් විදිහට. Now imports getting increase in here, right? Here import expenses increase, right? But we don't see export income increases as much, right? Import increase එක වැඩි, increase is greater than export income increase, right? That is what we are seeing in here. Import expenses increase is greater than export income increases. As a result of that, we are having trade deficit in short term, right? Short term. But when people are ready to substitute, ready to consume import substitute, then import demand getting declining, right? And when we are ready to provide more export goods and foreigners are ready to buy our goods, then export income getting increases. Here what we can see is, right, import expenses now getting lower than export income, right? So then we have seen that trade balance gradually move into the deficit, right? So that is the expectation of depreciation domestic currency in order to manage trade deficit, right? Trade deficit එකක් යන්න කරන්න වෙනවා, but short term period that getting worse. The short term period that getting worse. Okay, so we can see it. Even appreciation, you can see that, right? After the purpose of appreciation mean, right, it's encouraging imports, right? It's encouraging imports and it's discouraging export. But people are take times to, right? People are take times to get more import demands, as well as people take times to reduce export, since export getting expensive when currency getting appreciated, right? Samanya domestic currency appreciate වෙච්ච ගමන් මොකෝ වෙන්නේ? Imports getting cheaper and export getting expensive. Even import getting cheaper, people need to substitute, people need to change its behavior for import goods. ඊපස්සේ දැන්ට පාවිච්චි කරන එක අයින් කළානේ import වලට යන්නේ. ඒකට කාලයක් යනවා. එහෙනම් මුලින්ම අපිට import expenditure වැඩි වෙන එක පේන්නේ නැහැ එච්චර. ඒක අමතරව export expensive වුණාට foreigners-ට කාලයක් යනවා export වලට වෙන ආදේශක හොයාගන්න. ඒකට export income එක ලොකුවට අඩු වෙන්නේ appreciate වෙච්ච ගමන්. But when the time being there, when the time is being, import income increase and export income decrease, so we can see there is a trade deficit, right? So that is the way we identified as first action of managing trade current account deficit, that is currency depreciation. Second one we identified as protectionism. Second one we can identify as protectionism. What is a protectionism? ඊළඟ strategy එක තමයි current account deficit එක manage කරන්න ආර්ථික විසින් ගන්න protectionism. That means we can impose tariff, we can import quotas or some any other import restrictions. So tariff mean we know they are specifically imposing taxes to import goods, and quota mean they are providing some restriction to the quantity of the imported goods, right? Quota එකක් කියන්නේ අපි ආනයනය කරන්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රමාණය සීමා කරනවා. tariff එකක් කියන්නේ ආනයනය කරන භාණ්ඩ වලට බදු පනවනවා, right? Either both cases, the results are ultimately rise the price of the product consumer by an erosion of the purchasing power and collective declining in the standard of living. Now remember, even we are trying to impose tariff for quota or whatever to manage the current account deficit, that will not finally manage the current account deficit. Okay, that is why there is argument that such restriction do not correct trade imbalances. Why? How it is happened? Because we have discussed that one in earlier, right? We have that one, because if you want to control or if you want to manage the trade account or current account deficit, you have to deal with national product, national expenditure, savings, and what we call domestic investment, right? Remember what we discussed in our equations. Without touching those things, if you are trying to impose tariff for quotas or whatever, there is no actual result of current account deficit management, right? So let's look at this. This is a basic national accounting identity: saving minus investment, export minus import, right? Unless saving or investment behavior change, right? If we are trying to impose tariff for quota or whatever, that says if we have reduced $1 of import due to the tariff and quota, that will end up with decreasing in export by again $1. ඒක අවසානයේ නැවත වෙන්නේ මොකක්ද? export වලුත් අඩු වෙනවා. Right? So any reduction in import from tariff or quotas will be offset by the reduction in export and also increased by another import. right? So that is why economics are arguing that keeping that controlling imports in order to manage current account deficit, right? In order to manage current account deficit does not give effective results from that. Effective result එකක් එන්නේ නැහැ. Right? So what will happen if you are imposing tariff for something, right? So it definitely increase the import expenditure. It definitely increase the export expenditure. That means if you are producing domestic goods or services by incorporating imported raw materials or imports, then domestically producing goods and services getting increased. When the domestically producing goods and services getting increased, the inflation going to be increased in a country. When there is inflation in the country, it will affect to the export prices. So export prices will affect. As a result of increase in the tariff, the ultimate impact is goes to decrease the export. Then that can import අඩු කරගන්න tariff පැනවීම තුල අවසාන වශයෙන් වෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? export උත් අඩු වෙනවා. Right? So this is occurring as a result of importing tariff for quotas. Okay, so we have to touch with saving investment. We have to touch with saving investment, or else we have to touch with national product or national expenditure in order to control current account deficit or surplus. So that is the main thing you need to understand through this discussion. Right? The last strategy we can use to manage current account deficit, that is the best one, boosting the saving rate. Okay, now we identified through our previous discussion, low saving rate trend to lead to current account deficit. Right? Low savings, if we are having low saving than investment, right, then it will go with the more imports than export. Right? මේ පැත්ත අඩු වෙච්ච ගමන් මේ පැත්තේ මොකෝ වෙන්නේ import වැඩි වෙනවා export වලට වඩා. Right? Then we are ended up with current account deficit. Okay, so best way to reduce the current account deficit would be to simulate saving behavior. Right? So how we can stimulate saving behavior? So saving rate can be boosted by creating further tax favored saving vehicles, privatizations, social security, or switching from the income taxes to consumption tax. That means people are getting more rewards for the savings than consumption. Right? This kind of strategies we can apply to boost up the saving rate. And remember, as such, the changes in tax regulation and tax rate may greatly affect to the saving. Right? Any changes in taxes definitely impact to the saving as well as the investment behavior, and therefore nations trade and capital flow. If we are having touch with saving and investment, it's going to be influenced to the import and export. As a result of that, it's going to be influenced to the capital inflow and capital outflow. Okay, so you can understand that how national policy is going to be linked with current account and financial account. So these are the basic things we need to understand through the balance of payment. Okay, right. This is why the current account deficit would not be viewed as a problem. Right? So I told you that the surplus, current account surplus or current account deficit may not be a problem for a short-term period, but if it is kept for a long term as a trend, then it would be a problem. Right? Now look at this example. Okay, here the Sri Lankan people have a low propensity to save, and Sri Lanka have more attractive place to invest. Right? This example is appear in your textbook, not as a Sri Lanka, but as a USA. I change it for your understanding purposes. So if you have more attractive place to invest, like Lanka got investment attractive place, there will be a capital flow, capital inflow from the rest of the world, and net inflow for goods and services to Sri Lanka. Right? The capital inflows වැඩි වෙනවා, so that the meaning of financial account having surpluses, as well as we are having more imports than export. As a result of that, current account having deficit. Okay, so that is why the current account deficit would be a greater regret as a efficient adoption of different saving propensities and investment opportunities in Sri Lanka and rest of the world. That's why at the beginning of our discussion, I told you most of the economically healthy countries keep current account deficit in order to attract investments. Right? That's why Vietnam is doing. That's why USA is doing. That's why Germany is doing it. Right? From this perspective, current account deficit becomes a solution, not a problem. So it becomes a solution in order to attract investment. But there is a problem. That is why I told you. Surplus or deficit is not good for a long-term period. Since we are having more current account deficits, that indicate that there is a real problem, either too much consumption, because we are consuming more than we are earning, as well as little saving and too much investment. Right? So many investment we are having, but some investment may not be good for a nation's wealth. Okay, so the cumulative effect of current account deficit is to reduce by nation wealth, nation net international wealth. Now remember, if you are having so much of deficit for a long-term period, right? We have to attract investment, or else we have to borrow. Borrow කරන්න වෙනවා, ණය ගන්න වෙනවා. If you have borrowing, what we can do? What will happen? What will happen? It will finally affect the net international wealth of the country. That is what Sri Lanka is currently facing on. Okay, the consequences of reduction of nations' international wealth depending on how far we are investing our foreign capital inflows in a productive way. එහෙනම් අපි රටට ගනු ලබන ආයෝජන හෝ රටට ගනු ලබන ණය කොච්චර දුරට productively invest කරනවද කියන එක මත තමයි අපේ nations international wealth එක depend වෙන්නේ. Okay, so if the capital inflow finance productive domestic investment, then nation is better set off. Then nation is in a good position. Why? Because the investor invest that long funding to the good domestic projects, then they earn income through that project. Through that earning income, they set off the loan. So the income again tamai loan එක set off කරන්නේ. Right? And then the living standard of people also increase because the domestic investment getting increases. Right? But if we are taking that capital inflows to finance the current consumption, right? It will increase the nation well-being today. But today we have a good living standard. But remember, it will expense the future well-being. Yeah. When we are going to pay the loan. That is what exactly happened in Sri Lanka right now. Right? We are taking capital inflows as a loan and we use them to consumption, not for the productive domestic investment. Right? This is why theories are there to learn. But unfortunately, people who are in a decision-making role is not taking that as a ground rule. As a result of that, whole nation getting suffer. Okay, so that is why I continuously saying that having current account surplus or current account deficit for a long time period is not going to be healthy for any nation. But it is good if you're having deficit and if you are attracting more investment and use them for a productive domestic investment, then finally nation's economy getting boost with the domestic investment with foreign investments. Okay, so these are the things we need to learn from the balance of payment. Right now, I believe that you understanding why we have to have good knowledge about how country going to balance with what it earns and what it expends. Right. So these are some sort of example I promised you at the beginning to show you, right? This is the way that balance of payment data going to be recorded. Here you can see current account, capital and financial account, and the some sort of dispenses are there. That means when we are doing the statistical things, right, miscellaneous things, we have to be balances. Okay. And this is example in Sri Lanka BOP account. You can see the current account is there and capital and financial account together. Right? There is no separate capital account here. And even in India, you can see, since this is a very old data, but I just don't look at the data, but just look at the way they present. The current account is there. Here again, capital account and financial account. Okay. And then the last one, it is coming with the USA, right? It's coming with USA. Again, you can see current account is there and financial account. There is no capital account they are presenting. Right. So this is a way that balance of payment records are there. International transaction records are there. Right. So that's the end of the session number 8. I think that is the last session we are discussing under the basic theoretical and conceptual understanding of international finance. So here what we are dealing is today, as I summarize here, we discuss about the balance of payment, its main 3 account categories, right? And most importantly, we discuss about the link between or link among national accounts and current account and financial accounts, or national policies with current account and financial account. And then finally, we understand what sort of strategies then country can use to manage current account deficit. Okay, so that's the end of the basic discussion coming with international finance, right? So I believe that you get a very good understanding about how foreign exchange transactions or foreign currency transactions are occurring and what sort of mistake as a country we have done, and those knowledge will be able for you to make your future in a better way when you are going with your position in a decision making role, right? Remember, before you act, look at the long-term consequences every time. දෙයක් කරන්න කලින් දීර්ඝකාලීනව වෙන්න පුළුවන් consequences බලන්න. Okay, that's my last things you need to you need to remember, right? As usual, the lesson for today, right? So this is some sort of one of the quote taken from Mother Teresa, and it says, it is not about how much you do, but it is about how much love you put into what you do that counts, right? So it doesn't matter what you do, right? Or how you are going to do it, but remember what sort of dedication, what sort of commitment, what sort of effort, and what sort of willingness you put into that work will be count. That's we call the satisfaction we finally get through what we do. Okay, so think about it as a lesson for today, and hope you are getting good understanding with the session 8 under the international finance subject. Thank you very much for all of you to listening this, and wish you all a very good day.